part of the conference, I would love to invite our panelists, and I've done a quick run through and check, and I believe they are all here, which is good. So if all of our panelists would be happy to now sort of join me on screen, so switch cameras on, and we'll get ourselves prepared for the panel. I can see them all slowly joining us, which is great. So thank you very much, everybody. And yes, I have got everybody. Perfect. This is everyone I was expecting. Wonderful. So what I think I will do is I will ask everybody to go around and introduce themselves, first of all. Give everybody the opportunity to introduce themselves. It would be great to find out sort of a little bit about who you are, what your background is. If you have sort of the background either working in the diversity and inclusion sector or your own personal experiences of diversity and inclusion within your work. So just a few minutes from each of you would be great. If any of the attendees have any questions they would like to ask during the panel, I have a few pre-prepared, but I'd love to get questions from yourselves. So please do either pop them in the chat box or use the raise hand function, and we can get you to ask your questions on screen. So Jackie, you've appeared first on my screen, so I'm going to start off with you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jacqueline Cheltenham, and I'm the National Programme Director here at the University of Law, and the programme which I direct is the Bar Practice course. So to do a bit of background on myself, I studied at Durham University originally, and I studied English literature there. I then went to do the law conversion course at what was then called the Polytechnic of North London and now is part of Middlesex University. And then I went to bar school, and I practiced at the bar until about 1998 when I left and joined the College of Law, as it was then, as a lecturer. And then I've moved through the ranks over the intervening 26 years and find myself here as the National Programme Director. To sort of go back to sort of some of the sort of things that I've encountered throughout my experience of life. At university, I was one of about 5 Black students, I would say, at the whole university. And at school, there were fewer than 5 Black people. So it was potentially quite isolating in the sense that it was also back in the 1980s when people were much more forwards. They weren't at all backwards in coming forwards with their racism, let's say. So I had a lot of experiences like that. Once I went to bar school, it was much more diverse, but only some of us made it through to sort of pupillage and then practice after that. I was recalling a couple of incidents I had in practice where I remember we had a chambers party and I was one of the pupils there. So obviously the very lowest rank, and they'd even had a bit of a discussion about, well, should we invite the pupils to come or not? And in the end, they decided that we could come and be part of the party. And it was a party where they were inviting solicitors that instructed their chambers. So it was a kind of marketing party, effectively. And some of the solicitors that turned up were Black. And I remember one of the members of chambers coming to me and saying, have you invited your family to the party? So I was like, yeah, I've only just been inviting myself. So yeah, I'm going to go and bring my grandmother over from Barbados to come to your rather cheap party. So the answer to that was no. And then another time I remember being in court as a pupil again. And someone was talking to me saying how they could very much tell the difference between African and West Indian people, and West Indian people terribly lazy, etc., etc. And I said, well, which one do you think I am? And he said, African. And I said, no, actually, I'm from a West Indian background. So just things like that. But as I say, that was by now, this is like the early 90s and the 90s. So I hope things have got better for people. And the only experience I want to mention in relation to careers advice that I got at Durham. So I think Durham at the time, and maybe still does, if any of you from there, you can tell me, had a very kind of solicitor focus. It wasn't very bar focused. And my father had suggested to me during my English degree that perhaps I should consider being a barrister because he's got brothers who are back in the Caribbean. And so I thought, oh, okay, let's see. So I went to speak to the careers advisor, and the careers advisor we were talking about publishing and things, because obviously I was doing English, and then I said, "Oh, my dad wants me to be a barrister," and she said, "Ooh, stand up." And I stood up and she said, "Oh, yes, you're very imposing. I think you should be a barrister." And that was the extent of the careers advice I had in relation to that. So I can see Hannah laughing. So I know for a fact that things are better now. So that's just a bit of background about me.
That's brilliant, Jackie. Thank you. And you're definitely imposing in a good way. I'm having, knowing you as I do, you're imposing in a very good way. So I think that's fair.
Thank you.
Thank you
Makes me
so
feel a bit
much.
better.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Val, you have appeared next on my screen, so I wonder if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Hannah, and hello, everyone. My name is Bal. I'm an in-house solicitor at West Midlands Police. In terms of my kind of educational background, so I'm from Birmingham. I did my undergraduate law degree at the University of Birmingham. I then did my LPC MSc at the fantastic University of Law, and then went on to do my training contract off the back of a vacation scheme at a mid-sized international law firm called Trowers and Hamlins. Once I finished there, I then qualified at DLA Piper, so a global law firm. I was there for about a year and a half, and then made the switch to in-house and public sector during the pandemic. So now practice commercial property and commercial law at West Midlands Police. For anyone that's unaware, West Midlands Police is the second largest police force in the country. So a large organisation and a very kind of different world to your traditional law firm. Outside of my kind of day jobs, I currently chair the Birmingham Law Society in-house committee, which is a very thriving community now. As you're all aware, 1 in 4 solicitors are in-house, and I personally see that number increasing over time for D&I reasons and for some non-D&I reasons as well. At the national level, I'm a council member for the National Law Society, so I represent 0 to 6 years PQE solicitors across England and Wales. And that's all about kind of discussing, debating, and shaping policy within the legal profession. So I guess my kind of involvement with D&I is understanding it from many different lenses. So a mid-sized international law firm, a global law firm, and now public sector and in-house. As someone that has the privilege of speaking to and working with junior lawyers across the region and across the country, I hear firsthand what the issues are, and they vary across the country as well. And of course, within in-house and public sector, and I guess wider than legal, the D&I conversation within policing as well. So yeah, I've seen D&I in action in many different guises, and I'm seeing it progress in many different ways as well. So happy to be part of this conversation today.
Fantastic, Bal. Thank you so much. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you. As we're going through the introductions, if any questions pop in for any of the panelists, please do pop them into the chat box. I'm now going to go to the team from S&B because I can see you both on screen in one shot, so that's lovely. So Asra and Loretta, thank you so much for joining us. I'll allow you to introduce yourselves.
You go first. There'll be a lot of this. Hi, Hannah. Thank you for inviting us to join. My name is Asra Ahmed. I'm an associate solicitor in the employment team at Stevens & Bolton, based in Guildford. I joined Stevens & Bolton not too long ago in October. I'm about 1.5 years qualified. And my educational background, I suppose, is I grew up in Chichester. And I went to university in Southampton for my undergraduate, which I did history. I didn't do law. And then I realised I didn't want to be a history teacher, so I converted to law. And I did my conversion course at the University of Law, which is where I met Hannah, who very kindly employed me as a student ambassador because I was always poor. And yeah, I mean, I suppose my experience in terms of diversity, or my personal experience in terms of diversity, is I've always grown up, worked in, and just been based in traditionally very non-diverse areas of the country. And in terms, I wouldn't call it disadvantage, but I had no idea what a career in law entailed. I actually turned up to my conversion course And I thought, I'll do this conversion course and then I'll be a solicitor. I only really learned 2 weeks in. I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to do another degree after this. Oh, and I'm going to have to do another training contract. At which point, I mean, I paid too much money at that point, so I couldn't really back out. But it would have been helpful to know this before, which is, I suppose, the kind of leg up you get if you've grown up around people who work in professional careers. So that's me.
Okay, so hi, I'm Loretta Ashley. I work in the HR team at Stevens and Bolton. I've worked at Stevens and Bolton for nearly 6 years. I've got a very varied role, so I'm an HR manager, so I literally look after the recruitment side of things all the way through to the employee life cycle. So I love that part of the job. It's really varied. Prior to Stevens and Bolton, I actually didn't work in law. I worked for insurance, so professional services still. But I've been working in HR for 20 years, but things have changed a lot in that time. But recently, since joining Stevens and Bolton, the forum for D&I was set up about 5 years ago. And it's been on a bit of a journey, so we'll come across obviously we'll cover that today. But it's been interesting to see how that's really picking up and how it's becoming much more forefront of our decisions, our policies, our kind of strategic plan generally. So yeah, I've seen it come on a journey. But yeah, HR is kind of my bread and butter. I absolutely love what I do. And if we can, tap into other people's views on how we can make things better for employees, I'm all up for that. So nice to meet you all today.
Fantastic. Azra, Loretta, thank you so much for that. And last, but certainly by no means least, Assunta, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. I'm Assunta del Priore. I'm a barrister specialising in employment law at 9 St John Street Chambers in Manchester. And I also sit as a Deputy District Judge of the County Court on the Northern Circuit. I am from an ethnic minority background in Scotland. My father is a first-generation Italian immigrant. My mother is from a Gaelic-speaking community in the Western Isles, and I went to a state school in Glasgow. I found my way into the law as a career changer and was called in 1998. And that was before the Disability Discrimination Act, which is the predecessor of our current equalities legislation, had come into force. It was before the coming into force of the Equal Treatment Directive and many of the legislative protections of the early 21st century, which relate to diversity and inclusion. And I had a somewhat difficult path to the bar, but was helped along the way by firstly doing careful research and being very strategic, and secondly by coming across people who didn't see class, didn't see accent, didn't see ethnicity, and who were advisors and mentors to me. I am disabled. I have had the experience of working through my disability and coming back to practice at the bar. Before I was disabled, I was the Inclusion, Diversity and Equality Officer for 9 St John Street Chambers. But I've had the experience of being in different chambers where upon return to a chambers party after a maternity absence, I was greeted with if you like, a no fat birds kind of at this party reaction, and in general, a sense, if you like, hostility to the idea of women taking maternity leave. But that was at a different set than the one I'm at now. I'm happy to say that at 9 St John Street, we have a strong culture of embracing D&I values. We know that we're not there yet, but we have a number of initiatives which are aimed at giving access to the profession from applicants from non-traditional backgrounds. And I can talk a little bit about that if anybody wishes to ask questions.
Fantastic, Assunta. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Thank you to everybody for introducing yourself. Be very colloquial, I'm obsessed with this panel because I think all of you have such fantastic backgrounds and just so much knowledge to be able to share today. So just thank you so much to all of you for joining the panel today. So as we said at the beginning, if you have any questions you would like to ask the panel overall or specific members of the panel, please do either pop them into the chat box, or if you want to use the raise hand function, I can come to any of the attendees that we have. But I'll start off with a bit of a question. Obviously, those on the call today are from generally either careers advisors at universities or law school tutors at universities. So speaking to prospective, hopefully future solicitors and barristers. So for any of you that speak to juniors or trainees, what are some of the concerns that those juniors and trainees are coming to you with when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and what's some of the advice that you give to them? Azra, Loretta, I wonder if we maybe start off with yourselves from that perspective.
So I, being a junior member of the team myself, I have a lot of involvement with our trainees, and also slightly in the application stage as well, because we recently had our back schemes come through, and they find it quite useful to speak to other juniors. In terms of addressing their concerns, I think you've probably got better examples of direct kind of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think
concerns that are raised.
Yeah, I think
in the recruitment process.
In the recruitment process, I mean, I think that it's more about making sure that there's a fair process, that people are being considered from all different backgrounds. I think we'll come on to this in a bit more detail, but we are looking at improving things as things aren't perfect right now. We do anonymise applications. We are trying to look at ways of removing unconscious bias in our processes, which none of us like to think we have, but we all come from different backgrounds and maybe we do. So we're trying to really kind of focus on that. And so I think it's making sure that the concerns that they bring to us aren't really in the recruitment process. I wouldn't say they bring concerns to us, but I think they just want to be treated fairly as possible to make sure they are considered for their own merit. We're looking at tools going forward. There's something called real rating, which we're looking to bring in the next round of trainees to actually help balance the different types of applicants, to make sure we are fairly looking at, their social mobility, do they come from different backgrounds, what would they have scored if they'd had more support, or if they weren't a carer, for example. So although some of the concerns are us looking at it more proactively, I think this is a kind of general voice that people want to be considered, and the volume of applicants is increasing. We've increased our intake this year. So we are naturally getting more of a diversity because of that, because we want to increase our junior intake. So I mean, there's a few examples where that Jenny gave us in terms of concerns about making sure we are not being biased in that process. It was the Gaza thing, wasn't it? That was that.
I mean, in terms of the concerns that actual juniors raise, we're quite focused on making sure they have a confidential support system. So all juniors are given a buddy when they join. So for example, when I joined, I was given a member of my team who was just a few years more qualified than me, that I could be my first point of contact if I had any concerns. That wasn't just in terms of concerns about diversity and inclusion, it was just for anything. And then all the trainees have a direct supervisor as well within the team. Again, somebody, not a partner. It's quite important that we have it kind of mid-level, so there's more of that kind of comfortableness to come forward. And then when those concerns do come forward, we essentially take their lead. Our focus is to say, okay, if you have a concern, we would like to take it further up. We would like to address it at a manager level, but only if the person who is making that report is comfortable for us to do so, because they're not always. And then we also partner with Law Care, which is a charity run by members of the legal services industry, members of the Legal Service Dentistry. It's a voluntary charity organisation. We encourage people to attend webinars by them, but essentially they have a confidential helpline. So if for any reason, I mean, our aim is obviously to encourage a very inclusive environment where juniors would feel comfortable reporting something to us. But if for any reason they didn't, we make it clear that there is a separate confidential helpline for them to approach somebody who worked in the legal services industry and get advice, and all the advice between law care advisors and anybody who approaches them is completely confidential. So there's absolutely no risk of it coming back to us if the person who reported it didn't want it to. The example that you were talking about is in our recent round of back scheme, the kind of concerns that we're getting right now in terms of strictly in D&I. In our recent round of back scheme interviews, we had an interviewee who raised a concern about being openly Jewish at work because of the current conflict in Gaza. And the advice that the kind of is given to them is that, I mean, I think it was quite good of Jenny just to say, you know, our own interests aside, make sure when you're choosing a firm, look at the culture of the firm. Choose somewhere that you think is going to really hear your concerns. And the practical aspect of that, I mean, you obviously go online, you look at reviews, you speak to people. One of the challenges that we're currently trying to address is that internally, we know that we're a fantastic firm. It's a very inclusive environment. We've got lots of initiatives going forward. But for example, we're having a website rebrand this year where we want to put all of our activities on that front to the forefront, to the public, because it's not always clear when you look at firms or you look at employers. It's not just looking around. Actually, when we did some market research, it's hard to tell just by looking at the website or looking at reviews what everybody's commitments to D&I are, and that's an area that we're trying to improve in. That was a very long-winded answer to your question. Apologies.
But a really good answer. So thank you. That was really good. Bal, I might come to yourself next, just because there's been a question put in the chat box for Asunta and for Jackie, so I would rather ask that question. So I wonder, Bal, if I could come to yourself, because I know you do a lot of work with juniors and newly qualified. So yeah, what kind of concerns are you seeing from that perspective?
Yeah, so a long list actually, both as a council member that represents junior lawyers, so issues that juniors have faced specifically in relation to D&I from both a regional and a national level. I've heard juniors saying that firms do not represent them, whether that's through their senior teams or even through things like marketing. So I think if juniors can't see themselves in through their colleagues reach the higher levels of their organizations, then it may hamper their aspirations somewhat. I've heard juniors say that some firms are not very inclusive when it comes to things like holding socials. Particularly before the pandemic, almost every legal event or social event was based around alcohol. Friday drinks, that was just a common thing. Post-pandemic, I think that's changed because people don't tend to be in the office for one reason. But I think that has been a massive kind of sea change in culture in terms of what kind of events are we putting on. A lot of people, quite rightfully, don't feel comfortable going to a pub or a bar anymore. So a lot of firms are changing that, but a lot of firms are not changing that still. Not recognizing certain religious events. I think still some firms don't recognize, the major religious events and festivals that do impact their workforce. I've heard a lot of juniors say that to me as well. And I think early on, interview panels, sometimes some interview panels are not very diverse when it comes to reflecting the workforce that they want, and having a mixture of people to get really informed views to make, that decision as to whether we should hire someone or not. And I think we can all agree the different minds that we have around that table will produce a better candidate at the end of the day. Linked to that kind of interview panel, but further on down the line, is retention schemes. We always hear about the fantastic recruitment campaigns going on, but we very rarely hear about the retention schemes that will impact those juniors 2-3 years down the line. And a lot of people say that they say that they're fed all these fantastic pieces of marketing to get into the organization, but as soon as they're in, that's it, and then that's where it kind of can trail off. And yeah, to even more serious things, I've heard people in more larger law firms talk about the gender and diversity pay gap within their organisations as well. But again, in the previous session, I've heard that the Law Society and the SRA are looking into making sure people are disclosing that data to then being able to penalise them in the future. And then last but not least, people from the disabled community not feeling able to disclose that information because they think that that information will hamper their opportunities within the organisation. So a long list of issues facing juniors, and that can vary across the size of your organisation, where you are in the country, and how much PQE you are as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and we've heard that quite a lot today, that the disabled, those who identify as disabled there's a lot of work to be done there for more inclusion from that profession. So I wonder now if I could come over to yourself, Assunta and Jackie, and I think from what I can see, this message has been sent direct to myself rather than to everybody. So you haven't had a chance to see it yet. So I will read it out and then I'll come to each of you, perhaps Assunta, if I start with yourself, and then I'll come to you, Jackie. So the question is around what are some of the kind of biggest changes that you've seen in recent times to help those from underrepresented backgrounds get to the bar? It's often seen as a career that's out of reach for so many. So it would be great to hear kind of what's been done in that space, and for more Assunta specifically, kind of what's being done within your set itself and the space to make sure we keep going in the right direction there. So Assunta, perhaps we could start with you.
Certainly. So there is an acknowledgement at the bar that we are not good enough at embracing equality and diversity, and that though there have been significant strides in the direction of making the bar more inclusive over recent years, that we do not yet reflect the balance of society. So in terms of general initiatives at the bar, I think that our Inns of Court and our circuits who have a quasi-educational function in relation to aspiring applicants at the bar, and they have various outreach programs which are designed to encourage people from ethnic minorities, non-traditional backgrounds, underrepresented groups at the bar to get involved in the bar. And it's worth, I would suggest, going to the websites of the Inns of Courts, where you will find very useful data and information about applying for their various programs, which are of assistance to help people access the profession. In terms of my own chambers, I'm grateful to my colleague Amy Smith, who has spearheaded a number of important initiatives since taking over as our head of pupillage and tenancy. We offer two awards, two access awards aimed at encouraging people who wouldn't normally aspire to the bar to think of it as a career. Firstly, an award aimed at school children, but secondly, an award aimed at university students. And the details of that can be found on our website. I'll put those in the chat box in a minute. But in effect, we offer the chance to, firstly, mini pupillages. We offer funding. We offer a £500 award. We offer a mentorship scheme. We offer the opportunity to shadow a judge. We offer a careers workshop. We offer a chance to meet one of our senior clerks just to talk through the expectations of the profession, amongst a number of other things. And we offer one such award per year, and the next award would fall to be made in 2025. In terms of other things, we are very keen to support disabled applicants to our chambers. And I can talk a little bit about the sorts of strides we've made there. We obviously design our processes to be as accessible as possible. We make it clear, as we're of course bound to in law, that we'll make relevant reasonable adjustments. But it seems to me it's one thing to have a duty to make such adjustments, and it's quite another thing to implement useful steps to make that possible at the point of encounter between an applicant and an organisation. And so I've been involved in pupillage interviews where we were met with one particular applicant who, notwithstanding having recently completed chemotherapy, still came forward to her pupillage interview, and she had huge misgivings about the process and had a bit of a wobble. And I was able to go out to speak to her to settle her mind, and to say that we would take this into account, that we would provide certain reasonable adjustments. And I, as a cancer sufferer myself, who has been through chemotherapy, I could, in effect, reflect back her own experience across that divide, and I think indicate to her that her disability in that regard would be no barrier. So that would be an example of the sort of thing we do. For those who become pupils with us, we offer, in addition to the classic pupil master pupil relationship, a trainee and a trainer relationship, we offer a confidential mentor within Chambers. We will put a prospective pupil in touch with their mentor ahead of time, and that person can be a safe space for the pupil to express any anxieties, take any problems they may encounter in the process to them, and know that that person will have it go no further. And that member of Chambers is not entitled to vote or to have any input in whether that person gets to be made a tenant in our Chambers. And one of our silks, Jamie Hamilton KC, who is the leader of the Northern Circuit at present, but notwithstanding that, he makes himself available to be a mentor to our pupils, and he's another person that people can have identified and signposted as a person they can take any issues they're encountering in relation to accessibility of the profession. So that's a little flavour of the sort of initiative we offer.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think it's really great to hear about so many wonderful initiatives that are being offered, by your set alone, and hopefully that is reflected, more widely across the profession. Jackie, obviously from your perspective, you stepped out of the profession itself X number of years ago, and you have been kind of with the University of Law for a long time. But obviously you mentioned at the start, there were a number of experiences that you had when you were within the profession. So from your perspective, do you feel that there have been positive changes since then, and are you seeing that reflected in, perhaps your teaching that you did earlier on, and any conversations maybe you now have with students?
I think in terms of it being a numbers game in a sense, or so people with all different protected characteristics going into the bar, and then a number always staying, and so that year on year there are more black women at the bar, etc. But just to use one example, but I think some of the difficulties, so the things that Assunta has said are all amazing and absolutely nothing like what it was like when I was at the bar. So that's really, really heartening. I think the difficulties, to kind of look at it a different way, are sort of getting to the point where you are being interviewed for Chambers, so getting into bar school, passing the bar school exams, having a CV and profile that is sufficiently attractive to Chambers for them to want to interview you. So, and I think some of the difficulties there remain. And I think as a university, we do lots of the sort of things that Asunta was mentioning, I was recently at an outreach program at Lincoln's Inn that you organised for me to attend, Hannah, for minority ethnic students. We have scholarships, we have a really full careers program and advice that we give. We've got a disability and inclusion service that works with students with disabilities. And we do things like, recently I was part of a team that we created a video called How to Survive Formal Dinners, because we thought that students from backgrounds where that wasn't part of what they've grown up with might be put off going to the bar once they learned at some point in the process that you have to join an Inn of Court and you have to have these dinners. And I know that nowadays it's not just dinners, but dinners will still potentially be part of it. So we wanted to create, it's kind of a cartoon video, just helping people know, what is it going to be like? What should I wear? Where can I get clothes that aren't massively expensive? How I can keep myself safe when I'm there. Conversation starters, how do I start talking to people? So we've done lots of things in that space ourselves. But in terms of students, it's a bit like also for the SQE, with the students from minority ethnic backgrounds doing less well in the SQE exams, so finding it harder to pass. Those are the barriers that still exist to getting people, through and into the profession. So it's all about trying to support people on the course, but people may not even get to the course if their schooling hasn't put them in a good position, as someone was saying in your last section of this today's conference. If you've not been at the right school that gets you everything you need to be able to do well in the exams, to then get to a university that does the right kind of courses and all that kind of stuff. So there's still a way to go, but I think it sounds, like at ULaw and, at the bar, I think people are very much alive to doing the best they can. And I think outreach into schools is a very helpful thing as well. Yeah.
Definitely, Jackie. Thank you so much. I can't quite believe the time, to be honest with you. So I can't actually believe I'm going to have to say this, but I'm probably going to have to ask my final question to all of you now, because we're a little tight for time, and obviously I want to make sure that all of our attendees aren't taken much further into their day. So the question I sort of like to end on, and I'll come around to each of you sort of one by one, would be, what would you hope to see in the legal profession when it comes to diversity and inclusion across the next sort of 5 to 10 years? So if we're thinking about what's to come, what would be your hopes for what could be achieved? And obviously, if there are initiatives that you have that you haven't managed to speak about so far that you do want to bring in here, please do. But yeah, what are your hopes for the next 5 to 10 years? Perhaps Bal, I could come to you first with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'd all like to see law firms and legal departments which are open and accessible to all, so that regardless of what you look like, you can succeed. I think that's the ultimate aim. But in terms of something tangible, I'd like to see clear criteria set for legal firms and organizations when it comes to publishing that data. I'd like to see penalties for lack of that data, and where that data is not up to scratch. And I think until we have that, I think D&I will still just continue to be a conversation as opposed to pure action.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There was an interesting point made by Jerry in the previous session that D&I was often still piecemeal within firms rather than part of their strategic aims and objectives. And I think that's a really good point. If there's no penalty or result of it not being in your strategic goals, then how is that going to happen? So yeah, really great point, Val. Thank you. Azra and Loretta, I'll come to yourselves next.
I completely agree with Val. It's really important that D&I needs to be part of the firm's strategic plan. We've just introduced our strategic plan, I think last month, which will take us into 2030. And our D&I initiatives were a part of that plan. So we've set concrete goals in terms of where we want to be in terms of representation for certain things. And I think just the act of setting a goal and giving yourself something to measure to puts a force behind it, because otherwise it stays just a conversation. And everybody has great intentions, But the reality is, we work in a busy industry. Commercial objectives often overtake, so unless you've got something concrete to work towards, it can slip behind other priorities. The other one I was thinking would be great, I think you're in agreement with me, is firms of just the profession generally embracing alternative routes to qualification.
Yeah.
Which, a bit more about.
Yeah, we were definitely on a journey with this as well, but I think this is something that personally I can see a massive increase in need for. I've been doing more recruitment recently, and I think personally that's something we should be looking at more in the next 5 to 10 years, speaking to recruiters. More and more people are coming through alternative routes for various different reasons. People can't afford to go to university anymore, but that's so I think there's more and more need to, and rather than being reactive, we need to be proactively seeking people from alternative routes and embracing that and really encouraging it. So we're definitely on a journey. It's not been easy, even the last few months, me kind of opening that conversation with people who come from people tend to recruit in their own type, don't they? And that's something we need to try and open up. So I think alternative routes are becoming more and more common. We've had a few recent examples recently, which is great. So we are looking at, obviously Silex and different routes and SQE, but also people coming from Scottish qualified, New Zealand qualified. We need to just be more creative because recruitment's really tough at the moment, as I'm sure everyone's aware. So from a commercial reason, but also from a D&I perspective, it's a win-win.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, absolutely. And I think certainly from what I've heard about and the conversations I've had, certainly with Azra, the Stevens and Bolton, I've got some fantastic aims and objectives with your D&I work. So that's really good to hear. And obviously, if there's anything you want to share in the chat box or anything like that, any links that you would like to put down, then please do. But yeah, no, completely agree with you both. Thank you so much. Jackie, perhaps I could come to yourself now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I was just thinking about actually intersectionality with various protected characteristics, but also socio-economic group. And I think when I first went to the bar, there were lots of barristers, say 10 years cool, so 10 years above me, who had come from quite working class backgrounds, because at the time higher education was free. So if you were, bright and interested, potentially the world was your oyster. And so and then obviously since that change, I've noticed on the bar course itself, but I'm sure more widely, that there are fewer people from lower socioeconomic groups making their way through to the bar course at that stage, because that's a lot of money spent just to potentially get there. And so actually picking up on the point that was just made, I think things like, and this is actually rumbling along on its way to fruition now, the barrister apprenticeship, which will go alongside, I suppose, in terms of similarity, the solicitor apprenticeship that's already available. But those things do make it possible for students to go in at 18 and then qualify whilst working, and avoid having to have massive debts, etc. And would be, as was just mentioned, sort of alternative method of qualification. So not instead of, but in addition to the current ways of doing it. So the barrister apprenticeship is not yet finalised, but it has begun the long process to doing it, and I have had some involvement with part of it. So hopefully that will make a difference in the next 5 years. That should become a thing. It will be up to chambers and other organisations to decide whether they want to utilise it. And I think that the employed bar, it will work quite well potentially. And I think for chambers, they'll have to work out how to make that work for them. So
Yeah.
that's what I'd say.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's going to be a really interesting piece to see that play out over the coming years. So absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. Anna Sunter, to finish off with yourself, what would you like to see?
I'd like to see a refinement and improvement of our recruitment processes so that we're better able to lift the filters of affinity bias and other forms of relevant unconscious bias in order to get better at identifying the brightest and the best and the most apt candidates for the bar. I would also like to see more robust initiatives for retention of vulnerable groups within the profession. I think we've got a lot better at bringing women back to the bar after periods taken out for, if you like, family-friendly reasons, but we're not there yet. Similarly, I'd like to see us getting better at initiatives to support those who have disabilities at the bar and to allow return to work to be possible and for people to re-engage with the profession after periods of health-related absence, for instance. And I think at the bar, we suffer a little bit from what I call magic pony syndrome. And that is, we're all supposed to be the magic pony. You instruct a barrister and bingo bango, you're going to win the case. You're going to have, and we hold ourselves to extremely high standards. We work very hard. We have a long hours working culture. And that can lead to excellence of delivery of service, but it can also take a huge toll on the individual practitioner. So I think as a profession, we need to get better about managing that balance. And that's what I'd like to see.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we will call it a day there, and I'm almost sorry that we didn't have more time with our fantastic panelists, because I think we could have probably talked for longer, and maybe that's a learning for me to make this part of the conference longer next time, because we could have, I'm sure, answered so many more questions and talked for so much longer. So I want to express my sincerest thanks to our fantastic panelists. So Assunta, Jackie, Bal, Azra and Loretta, thank you so much to all of you for kindly giving up your time this afternoon to come and join the panel. And I'm sure that our attendees who've been able to stay with us till the very end have really found it beneficial. So a big thank you from myself to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of the attendees. We have now reached the end of the conference, so I really do hope that you have found it beneficial. Thank you so much for giving up the start of your day to join us. I've certainly learned so much and found it also interesting. So thank you to all of you for joining us as well. We'll be in touch shortly with slides and recordings and all those sorts of things. But if you do have any questions, please do reach out for us. But for now, thank you so much, everybody, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.